Today on the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, episode number 145. Hey, you ever wondered why some people thrive under pressure while others just crumble? Join me as I sit down with Dr. Gary Sprouse, the author of Highway to a Happy Place. He reveals the secrets of mastering stress and finding joy in the most unexpected places. Next on the podcast. Let's do this.
Welcome to the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, a podcast about a journey of discovery and conversations about not sitting on the sideline of life. Let's get involved. Here's host Joe Foley.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. My name is Joe Foley, and I want to thank you for being here. And this is your first time to the podcast. Welcome. I want to explain what this podcast is about. I obviously No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast. It's about being a parent and a dad. That's obvious. But also, too, is talk about mental health, stress, lifestyle, stuff that we have to deal with every day. Because, being the parents, more than just, taking care of the kids, it's also about life stresses and stuff like that, which is kind of like we're going to talk about today with Dr. Gary Sprouse. And, what's funny, too, is, I want to give you a fact about stress, especially chronic stress on health, before we get an interview with Dr. Gary Sprouse. And I found it was interesting what chronic stress can do to physical health. I found this little paragraph from the American Psychological Association. And it says, chronic stress can have significant impact on physical health. These are a variety of conditions. When the body's under prolonged stress, produces a high level of cortisol, hormone associated with fight or flight response. Like you're in the woods, you're getting chased by a tiger or a bear, and you're like, you gotta go. Or, elevated cortisol can lead to suppressed immune system. Obviously, you get sick because your immune system is compromised. Increased blood pressure, risk of heart disease. The additional chronic stresses links to conditions like anxiety, depression, digestive problems, headaches, even sleep disorders. Especially when under high stress, I can even give an example is, and this happens to me actually, so that's why I can talk. I said I can talk about a little bit is, when I'm under a lot of stress, suddenly you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you have to get up at 5 o'clock to go to work, and your brain is just on race mode and you can't go back to sleep. And that's what stress can do to you. That's why I brought on Dr. Gary Sprouse to help us understand and navigate stress. And I think you're going to find a lot of great information in this interview. Let's jump right in. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Sprouse.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
One thing I was really interested in, I read on the website is, one of your things is Halloween, dressing up for Halloween. I thought that was pretty cool. That sounds like a lot of fun because people get to pretend to be somebody else and maybe reduce stress a little bit.
I have to tell you the story. So my wife and I do karaoke, and I take karaoke to a whole new level. So I get dressed up, right? So 20 years ago, I dressed up as Prince. So I got purple suede boots. I got a black wig. I got this New Orleans purple jacket that goes down to my knees. Two weeks ago, my wife and I are with the same DJ, and he's taking a break, and this lady comes up and goes, hey, I remember when you used to be at this other restaurant, and I remember there was some guy dressed up as Prince. And he looks over and points at me, and he goes, yeah, there he is. And she goes, no, that's the same guy. I'm like, yeah. And she comes over and says, hi, I have your picture on my phone. So she had my picture as me dressed up as Prince from 20 years ago. I was like, yeah. Yeah, so I've been making impact on people's lives for the last 20 years at least.
Well, it's interesting too. It makes people feel good and reduces their stress.
I don't care if they're laughing at me or with me. It's okay.
The one thing I actually picked up from the beginning of your book is we cannot control what happens to us, but how we react to it. What does that mean to you?
So here's what I've been finding. I see people in different situations and they react totally opposite. And it comes down to how you respond to the situation. So I'll use an example. So a policeman gets shot. Bad. One policeman will go, hey, he survived and I'm invincible. Other policeman will go, I just got shot. How can I ever go back out and work? Same situation, but different responses. What I've been finding is how you respond matters if you know what's going on. Like if you don't know what's happening or why it's happening, then how are you going to respond effectively? And so one of the things that I've looked at, and this is one of the linchpins of my book is, so I'm a doctor, right? And I'm used to dealing with medicines that have benefits and side effects. And so my job as a doctor is saying, hey, take this medicine, has really good benefit, and we'll do everything we can to minimize the side effects, right? So it turns out that stress is that most of our stresses are side effects to our skills. So we have the skill of being able to envision the future, but then we have the side effect of having to worry about what's going to happen. So we have the luxury of being able to choose, but then we have the side effect of being regretting the choices, the decisions that we made. And so when you start looking at our stresses as side effects to our skills, then you can start saying, oh, well, now I know how to respond to that situation.
What did you mean by skills? That's interesting.
Yeah. So humans have these amazing skills that other animals do not have. So we have the ability to envision the future. We have the ability to make choices. We have language. We have tools. We have the ability to decide what's right and wrong, good and bad, right? And so those are these incredible skills, but they come with side effects. So what I'm finding is that here's what a local or, traditional psychologist will say. You're going, hey, I worry too much. And they go, well, just live for today. And you're like, okay, well, that's a nice thought. First off, it's impossible as a human to live for today. And second off, that says what that's implying is give up your skill of envisioning the future because it has a side effect of worry. And you're like, no, I want you to keep the skill of envisioning the future. What I want to do is get rid of the side effect of worrying about it. And what I've been finding is that worry is actually really important. It's funny when I talk to my patients, say, tell me what worry is. And they get this look on their face like, I got this. Like, I know what it feels like. When I say it in a sense, people know what I'm talking about. But when they go to define it, it's really hard. And it's like saying diabetes. Like if you say diabetes and say, look, hey, diabetes is your blood sugar's too high. Yeah, but it's also got to do with your liver and your pancreas and your insulin levels and all this other stuff. As you know more about it, then you can do a better job at fixing it, right? So what I found with worry is when I define it and say worry is envisioning the future, which is an incredible skill, but then focusing on all the bad things. And then here's the key is having the fear response right now to something that hasn't happened yet. So that gives you an avenue of like, hey, what can we do to fix that?
The one I keep thinking about too is to avoid sometimes, because we have a vision of the future and stuff though, but sometimes we avoid it until we absolutely have to deal with it. The stress of worrying about stuff like that.
No, that's what I'm talking about. So like, we're going to come out with this 2 tools. First one is called realistic optimism. What that says is, look, I have a choice. I can choose to focus on all the bad things that can happen, or I can choose to focus on good things happen. So interesting when I talk to my patients, I say, so tell me some bad things that are going to happen. They go, write down 10 things really quick. I go, tell me some 10 things that are good that are going to happen. And they go, they're so used to looking at the bad things that they can't even envision a good thing from happening. And that's where the second tool comes in is the worry organizer. And the worry organizer allows you to do just what you said. I can look into the future. I can say, here's the things that I'm worried about, but doing it in organized fashion. And so the columns are, what is it that I'm worried about? Why am I worried about it? And here's the important column. Like, how likely is it to happen? And if it does happen, how bad is it? And then the next 2 columns are like, well, what can I do to make it not happen? And then the last column is, what can I do if it does happen? And so when you take that and you go, then now you can start planning for the future, but not with fear. Now you're just planning. And now you have it written down, so you don't have to do it over and over again. You can show it to other people to say, hey, is there anything I missed?
Well, I was thinking about too, you said 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. We think it's a good idea to write it down, get out of your head because, and everybody on those mornings say like, you wake up and your head starts racing. Next thing you know, it's time to get up.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because when you write it down, you only have to do it once. It's great. It says, my friend says, the palest ink is better than the best memory. And it's like, yeah, when you have to do it over. Plus, here's the other advantage. When you write it down, now instead of your brain have to remember what you're supposed to worry about, it's already written down. So now you just have to go back to your notebook, right? So I had a patient who was worried she was going to get breast cancer. And I was like, well, why? And she's like, well, both my mother and my sister have breast cancer. And I was like, oh, well, that's bad. And I go, so what's your likelihood of getting breast cancer and how bad would it be? She goes, 100% I'm going to get breast cancer. 100% I'm going to die from it. So she had given herself a death sentence. And I was like, so when she came to me, showed me these, I was like, well, when you have a family history of breast cancer, it's 15% chance. And I go, and because you're going to catch it early, you got an 85% chance of survival. She's like, wait, what? And you could see the weight just came off her shoulder because she went from a death sentence to 15% chance. She's like, oh, now I have my life back, right? So it was filling out that form really changed her life.
Do you think sometimes some people can manifest a medical condition?
Well, yeah. I mean, the statistics in the studies are overwhelming. Like your stress level will create physical problems. So there's a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. This is a great book. And it's like 300 pages of all the things that stress does to your body. And it's like, but it's so true. Ulcers, your hair falls out, your skin changes, you get asthma, your bowels get messed up, all kinds of crazy things. And a lot of it has to do with adrenaline and cortisol levels being elevated when you're stressed out.
Does stress cause weight gain?
Well, yes, in two ways. One, because cortisol will tell your body to gain weight. I mean, it will tell you to store energy. And two, because people, when they're stressed out, one of the things they tend to do is eat. So there's 5 things that food does for you. So the first is that it tastes good. Second, it looks good. It smells good. And it feels good inside your mouth. And then, it gets rid of that hunger sensation. So you don't have to be hungry to eat because you get 4 good things before you even get to the hunger part. And so people tend to use food a lot to assuage their anxieties and their stresses.
Can you share a personal experience, how you became about and shared your views on stress?
I'm a primary care doctor, and I was taking care of pain patients. I've been doing this for 38 years. So when I first started taking care of pain patients, I'm living in a rural area, so there wasn't pain management specialists. And so I started taking care of a bunch of pain patients. And we were being told at the time, you're not treating them aggressively enough. And blah, blah, blah. So, and then the pendulum switched. Then it was like, oh, you doctors are causing everybody to be opioid dependent, and this is bad. And so then I went from being, hey, you're doing a good job to, now you're going to get in trouble. And so my board was on my butt for 20 years going, we don't like what you're doing, and we're going to get you in trouble. And it cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it put my reputation at risk. It was horrible, right? But because of the stuff that I had in my book, I could say, hey, like, I'm going to focus on a good outcome. I'm not going to feel guilty that I was taking care of my patients, because in all these proceedings, all my patients were doing just fine, right? The pendulum had shifted, and I was shifting with the pendulum, but clearly not enough. But if it wasn't for my book, would not have made it through that.
What are some more stories you could share about the stress and stuff that you were like, wow, I'm really glad I helped that person because they were in a tough situation?
Yeah, well, so I had a patient that was, in my book, I write in it. She was sitting in her room. I'd been working with her doing some computer stuff, and she called me up and she said, I'm sitting here with my phone and I got a knife in one hand and a phone in the other, and tell me why I shouldn't end my life. I had another patient who was, here's what she said. She had been having problems with heroin, and we had gotten her off. She'd been sober for, 6 months or something, and she had a relapse. And then she was feeling bad. And she told me the story that she had tried to commit suicide by taking a whole bottle of Tylenol. And so she sat in front of the mirror waiting for herself to turn yellow from liver failure. And after 3 days, she didn't turn yellow. So she was calling her friends going, yeah, I just took a whole bottle of Tylenol. And nobody came to her. I'm like, these are horrible stories, right? But that lady, we spent like 2 hours talking about different stuff, how to handle the stresses that she had. And I got a phone call from her about a year later. I saw her on Facebook or something. And she was now married. She had a kid. She had a job. And I was like, yeah, good stuff.
As a parent myself, I may be having a bad day. I got a phone call. I got a piece in the mail. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm worried or I'm stressed out. And all of a sudden, your kid goes, Dad, Dad, Dad. And I think about, first you're actually going to snap at the kid. But give me ideas how to deal with that in a situation like that, because it all happens. It happens to all the parents.
Absolutely. So here's one of the things that I found is like when you start defining what an emotion is, right? So what I've learned is that humans are emotional creatures who can think. So our emotions happen in 1 second. Our thinking takes 5 seconds. So what happens is your emotion goes off and you're already reacting and then 5 seconds later you go, wait, I didn't need to do that. What did I just do there? So what I always recommend to people is to give yourself a 5 to 10 second delay from when your emotion goes off to let your thinking part of your brain kick back in, because your emotions were designed to be pre-programmed push button. So the button gets pushed and the emotion goes. Because when you're in the wild and you hear a noise behind you, you want to go, oh, was that a lion or a tiger? I don't know. I'm just running. So you had to give yourself. So when you find yourself getting ready to react, give yourself 5 or 10 seconds. And let the emotion kind of settle down, let the thinking part of your brain kick back in. And then you can react in a little more intellectual way.
Well, I like to title your book, Highway to Happy Place, a Roadmap to Less Stress. How did you come up with the title? It's pretty interesting because Everybody wants a roadmap to somewhere, but less stress would be awesome.
Well, here's what I found. It's fascinating. So I talked to my patients, say, so if you had less stress, where would you be? And they look at me like, well, I don't know. I never got that. I only envision having less stress. And that's when I decided, this was like 3/4 of the way through writing the book, that wait, you know what? I need to give people a definition. They're on the riverbank that's on the stressed outside, and on the other side of the riverbank is something. What is that? Well, it turns out that's where your happy place castle is, and your happy place. And it's like, people don't even know what it is. So how are you going to get there? So the whole first chapter is like defining a happy place. And it turns out, everybody's happy place has different nuances, but the components are the same. So the components are like, hey, I want to have a level of contentment. I want to have some pleasure in my life. I want to be able to anticipate pleasure coming into my life. I want to have gratitude for the things that I have, and I want to feel fulfilled. And then I've added this last piece just recently, and it's an acronym that I came up with called CASH. The C is for connected, because we all want to be connected. The A is for accepted, because we all want to be accepted. S is for safety, because what I've been realizing is safety is the underlying thing to everything that we do. And then the H is for hope, because we want to have hope. We want to look forward to something better coming our way. And when you put all those components together, man, is that not a happy place? Wow, it's an awesome place to be.
I have a question. What is your happy place? I can tell you mine. By a stream. I love streams. I love waterfalls and streams. I love sitting there. I can sit there for a while and I always see them, but that's kind of like my happy place. Peaceful. What is your happy place?
So I just retired at the end of 2023. And the house that my wife and I have the luxury of living in is on the water. It's on this large creek. And I have my beautiful wife, who's amazing. So here's what my wife and I talk about. We like to travel and go on vacation, but where we go has to be better than our house.
One thing in your book, one of the chapters talks about where is your danger response, working overtime. What does that mean?
Well, we have this built-in danger response. That's our fear response. And so fear was designed that if there's a lion or a tiger nearby or a bear growling, you run away or you hide. But in our society, we don't worry about bears and lions anymore. Actually, the most dangerous thing in our environment is other humans. Kind of scary, because we're also drawn to be attracted to them, right? We want to be connected with them, but they're our most dangerous things. Like, they can break our hearts, they can steal our money, all these kind of things. But our danger response was designed to get away from other animals. And so now our danger response has gotten thwarted. And now it's like, hey, you cut me off, and so I'm afraid. Or you watch the news and there's a war in Ukraine and you're starting to have a fear reaction now. And so but we sort of make that up. And the future is now part of our environment. So my dog, watching the news too, and she's just laying there hanging out. And I'm like, how can she be hanging out? There's a Ukrainian war. There's this horrible presidential election going on. There's crazy tornadoes and policemen getting shot. She's just laying there. I'm like, wait, what? And that's because this is what I'm talking about. She doesn't have the skill to envision the future. So she just sits there and relaxes. As long as I feed her and take her out and walk her every once in a while, she's in a happy place. So what I find then is our danger response goes off. Like, your smoke alarm goes off in the middle of the night and you get up and you're looking around and you don't see any smoke. And you're like, wait, what's going on? There's nothing here. And you're, oh yeah, it was the battery. So it's like the signal went off, but it wasn't signaling danger. So we just have to put the new battery in and go back to sleep. And that's where you have to be. The danger response is being overused at this point.
Well, it's interesting too. Like, I like listening to political podcasts and stuff like that. And sometimes I need a break because it gets stressful. It gets stressful because I was thinking about that when you were talking about the news and stuff, and then your dog and everything too. I like listening to it, but sometimes you got to turn it off because it's too much, especially in the climate of the world we are living today.
I will tell you that one of the biggest changes that's occurred in our world is the advent of social media. And so humans most of our information comes in visually, like 80%. So if you read a newspaper article that says, hey, there's a war in Ukraine, and you're like, wow, that doesn't sound very good. And it would get you upset. But if you see a video of some guy getting blown up, like some drone hovering over him and hand grenade dropping down and blowing him up, that is 80% more impactful on you. And so what do we have nowadays? Like 24-hour news cycles that are showing you video of everything. Our social media is on our phone, like in our face every minute of the day. It gets overwhelming to people because that's how we get information. So there was a football player, and when he got kicked out for 2 games because he had punched his girlfriend. When we heard about it, he got 2-game suspension. When we saw the video of him actually punching her in the face, he never played football again. And that's what I call the video effect. It is so much more powerful to humans to see something than it is to hear about it or read about it.
Oh, it does have an impact on everybody. I know I watch that stuff and I start worrying about stuff and I start getting really stressed out about things and I got to take a break from it because it's too much.
So now you need my worry organizer.
One thing I was interested too, I'm not really sure how this plays into stress, but guilt. How does that play into stress?
So guilt is, again, as we talked about, it's a side effect of one of our skills. So one of our skills is that we can decide is something right or is something wrong. So shame is something other animals feel. So my dog will drop her head when she tries to get in the kitchen and get out of the kitchen. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she walks away, right? So shame is something that humans have always had. And we use shame as a tool for society to manage our behavior in a group setting, right? That's what we say, like, don't do that, right? But humans, because we have right and wrong, have now elevated that to, we now have rules that are written down. We have rules that aren't written down, like what kind of clothes you should be wearing today and that kind of stuff. So guilt occurs when you've broken a rule. So if you go out and murder somebody, we want you to feel guilty. You should be saying, no, that was bad. I shouldn't have done that. So the people that we don't like are the sociopaths. They go, yeah, I killed the guy. What do I care? Right? We go, oh, we don't like that at all. Like, the mother who hurt her kid, who's crying and sobbing. We're like, okay, well, she did something bad, but at least she understands she did something bad and she feels guilty about it. So guilt was designed to manage our behavior in that group setting. Where it gets into trouble is when people beat the crap out of themselves over and over and over again for the rest of their life. That's where it gets into trouble. What I don't want is that they stay guilty for the rest of their lives and beat themselves up forever. That's where I come in and say, no. So one of the answers is there's a book that Desmond Tutu and his daughter wrote, and it talks about forgiveness. And so what I find is there's a process you have to go through to forgive other people, and more importantly, to forgive yourself.
I'm thinking about that for a second is, why do you think people have such a hard time forgiving themselves? Because I can forgive everybody, but I always have trouble, myself included, forgiving myself for things I've done in the past.
People wanted 2 things. One is like, if I forgive you for something, I get to choose. I'm choosing like, hey, you know what? I'm going to forgive you for that. You messed up and you're not going to do it again. So, okay, I can forgive you. But if I decide that, you know what, I don't want to deal with you anymore, I can just walk away from you. So one of the parts of the forgiveness process is you renew or you release. So you renew the relationship and now it's on a different level, or you release that, you know what, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to forgive you, but I'm not going to deal with you anymore. You don't have that choice with yourself. You're there forever. So you don't have the choice to decide to renew or release. You just have to work with it. And so that makes it much more difficult because you don't have that choice. Second off, I don't think people understand what guilt was meant to do. Like if guilt was, what I think is guilt was meant. So guilt is it's something that you did. It was in the past. It's always in the past. Like you can't feel guilty about something in the future because that hasn't happened yet, right? So, but you can't change what happened. So all you can change is the future, which is what I think guilt was meant to do. It's meant to discourage you from doing something, but it was also meant to change your behavior. So what I tell people is, say you got a DUI.
Yeah.
And now you're sober, but you're feeling guilty because you got a DUI. And you're like, okay, well, I get why you're feeling guilty because you did something wrong. But at this point, you haven't done it. And so guilt did what it was supposed to do. It kept you from driving drunk again, right? So as long as you are continuing to alter your behavior to fit the rules, then the guilt has done what it's supposed to, and now it can be reduced. You don't need to keep beating yourself up over and over and over again because it did what it was supposed to do. It changed your behavior.
One thing I never thought about this, but stress and boredom. I don't know how the two go together because if I'm bored, well, yeah, I can actually think about it. I'll be thinking about the stress, but I was wondering what you were thinking about that.
So when you were 17 and you didn't know what to do with yourself, what did you do?
I did nothing.
Yeah, I know. I remember in the book I write about boredom is bad. Like
It
I
is.
remember being a 16-year-old driving around the parking lot with 3 other buddies, hoping something would happen to relieve our boredom. And you're like, yeah, bad things happen when you get bored. Here's what I write about. You put somebody in jail for the rest of their life and they do something wrong in prison. What do we do with them? We put them in solitary confinement, which is like the worst punishment you can have. Now, what's solitary confinement? It's boredom.
Mhm.
Like there's no stimulation. You're just sitting there and you're bored. People literally go crazy if they're in solitary confinement too long because, yeah, it's bad, bad, bad. But what I write about is there's actually 3 forms, and that's what we don't realize. So the first one is you're in prison and you're put in solitary confinement, and there's lack of stimulation. The second one, which is the most common, I think, is it actually a withdrawal. So
Oh,
people are
wow.
like, if you don't drink coffee and you get a headache, or you stop smoking and you get all twitchy, or you stop drinking alcohol and you go on, start seeing pink elephant. Those are withdrawal things. What I find is that boredom is actually withdrawal from adrenaline. And so
Oh, wow.
like I've watched my kids and there's TV and there's videos and there's books and there's playthings and there's basketballs and footballs. And they're sitting there going, I'm
I'm
bored.
bored.
And the answer is they're bored because they're withdrawing. Their adrenaline level is at 8 and now it's down to 5. And they're feeling that what they're feeling is what they call boredom. And so what we've done as parents is, okay, well, let me get you a new video game, or let's go do something bigger. We need a bigger roller coaster, or better this, or more scary or that. And it's like we keep jacking it up, just like you would see with someone who has an alcohol problem. Like maybe 3 drinks was enough. Now it's 4 drinks. Now it's 10 drinks, right? You have to keep adding to it. Somewhere along the line, you have to let the meter reset and say, hey, you know what? Instead of, if you're going to say you're bored, fine, be bored. Let it reset and let it come back down to that 5 now as a stimulate.
I think right now, especially with social media and phones, this thing right here, we're
Yeah.
all overstimulated, overstimulated, always constantly interacting with the electronics and screens. I think we're overwhelmed than we are actually bored nowadays.
So this is where the side effects and benefits come, right?
Hmm.
The benefits of our smartphones are incredible. Like we literally have the world's knowledge in our hand. Like remember, I'm old enough now that we used to have an encyclopedia, like A through Z and 15 books, right? And what was in there, and you might be there 20 years later. We now have that much knowledge and like 50 times more in our hand. How incredible is that? It's amazing. But the side effect is we have social media where you can connect with anybody around the world. Amazing. But then there's side effects to it. And we're still learning as a society, as a human population, how to balance the benefits of this incredible technology with the side effects that come along with it. We haven't figured it out yet. We'll figure it out at some point.
Well, funny you mentioned about books. And the other day I saw a picture online. It was card catalog at a library. And my son's going to be 11. I go, can you tell me what that is? He goes, I have no idea, Dad, what that says. I said, that's what we used to look up for books. When we wanted to find a book,
Yeah.
we had to go to that catalog, look for that number, and that whatever the number, the digits, and we had to go look for that.
Yep.
So things are changed. Kind of cool to see.
Somebody the other day when I was an intern as a doctor. This was before computers, and so you had a lab slip that was written out. It had carbon copies, and you took it up to the lab. And at the end of the day, you had to go back up to this box, and you had to stand in line because everybody's at the same box, going through to find the patient's lab tests.
It was neat perspective from his point of view, and because I'm an older parent to see like he had no clue what that was. It was hilarious. It was actually funny. Maybe you could share some tips of people who feel overwhelmed and trapped to see how they can get out of that, because we're always seeking the way to get out, not be overwhelmed.
Well, this is, again, here's the biggest problem for humans that I see is that because we have all these skills and they come with all these side effects like worry, guilt, regret, and we have the ability to handle 5 and 6 things at a single time. Like we're in a very complicated society where there's things coming at us all over the place. What I find is that people get overwhelmed very quickly. But the reason they get overwhelmed is because they do what I call lumping. So lumping is I got this stress and this stress, and this stress and this stress. And they get to this mound of stresses that's so big, they can't even see the edges. And so they go, I don't even know what to do here. I think this is way beyond my coping skills. There's nothing I can do about this. And so in the book, I write about this cave where you're sitting in this cave where there's no light and it's dank and it's wet and it's cold and you're miserable and you want to get out and you stand up and your head on the ceiling and you reach out and you touch something slimy and you hit back and there's something painful and sharp and you go, there's no way out of here. I'm just stuck. And you just sit down in this resigned fashion and you just go, my life's going to be miserable the rest of my life because I don't know what to do. So then I come along and go, no. See that little light over this side? There's a light right there. Come on over here and let me show you. So the answer to being overwhelmed and lumping is what I call compartmentalization. And I use my shoebox method for helping people get unoverwhelmed, right? So if you walked into a bedroom and there was 30 shoeboxes thrown all over the room with the lid over here and the bottom there and the left shoe here and the right and the piece of paper that was in there and 30 of them like all over the place, you'd go, I don't even know what to do with that, right? But if you walk in and there's 30 shoeboxes with the bottom and the lid and the shoes in and the paper in and they're all like neatly up on the closet, same amount of shoeboxes, but now it's not overwhelming. And now you just take down one shoebox at a time, you look at it and put it back. Take one shoebox. So the answer is compartmentalization, but think in terms of shoeboxes. So what I found is that most problems, no one problem is overwhelming. It's only when you let them lump together. And I'll occasionally wake up in the morning, I got this and that and this and that and this and that. I'm like, whoa, stop lumping shoeboxes. Start thinking shoeboxes. And then when you do that, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. See this problem, I'm just going to deal with this problem today. This one I can wait till tomorrow. This one I got. Right. And as you just deal with one problem, even if they're related, the more separate you can keep them, the less overwhelming they become.
Like you're saying, it's probably better to focus on one thing at a time.
Absolutely. So one of my patients, one of the ladies who just read the book, she was awesome, right? She read the book and she said, you know what? I'm going to take control of my life. And so she sold her big house, bought a small bungalow for cash near the beach, and now goes to the beach 4 or 5 times a week and just chills out and enjoys her stuff. I was talking to her the other day. What she said is one of the things that I had to learn was less can be more. Because when you have too much stuff, it takes all this energy, time, money, effort to maintain it. So if you have less stuff, then yeah, life can be better. Like it could be less stress because I didn't really need that second car or I didn't need that third car or whatever, right? I didn't need the new furniture or the whatever. Like you find out like, you know what? I don't need all this stuff. Like, all right, let me just go back and be like, have less things to worry about.
Well, it's interesting too, is I'm curious, is there any technology to help deal with stress management? Any techniques or something you can share?
Here's what I find. People have all kinds of ways to reduce their stress. There's definitely technology. There's apps. What I have found is that there's incredible, like somebody said to me, Doc, what do you do when you're under stress? And I started ticking things off. Like I play basketball. I do karaoke. I dress up for Halloween. I read a book. I watch TV. I jog. I talk to my wife. I call my friend. Like a whole list, like 50 things, right? The problem is if you don't know what it is you're trying to deal with, then they can't be that effective. If I recognize I'm lumping, then I can do something about it. But if I'm just saying I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do, then none of your techniques are going to work, right? Or you end up overusing them. I'm going to have a piece of pie. Well, then you end up eating the whole pie because you really stressed out and it wasn't really working because you didn't know what you were dealing with. All kinds of technological things can help. But the real crux is understanding where your stresses are coming from, because then you can be the most effective and most efficient at getting rid of it.
Well, I was thinking about too, is it like maybe easier to deal it head on right away or let it, because I think if you let it fester, it builds up more.
When we started talking in the beginning of this interview, it was like, how do you deal with your stresses? When you understand where they're coming from, it's way easier to deal with them. When we talked about how being able to react to your environment, when you understand what's coming at you, then you can defend it a lot better and a lot faster, right? And so, yeah, it's way easier to deal with something now than it is to deal with it later on.
I always find that true too, because the problem's about that big, but I wait a week and it's the size of a car. But if I just dealt with it head on right away, I don't have to deal with the car later on.
Well, and what I find is here's what I see, is that people don't like feeling out of control. Like we like to have a sense of control. And when you're overwhelmed or you're stressed out, that's the one thing you don't feel. You don't feel like you're in control. That then becomes another stress that you throw on top of the heap, right? And so when you feel like you're more in control, then you can handle things and take care of them when they're ones instead of waiting till they're tens.
Well, wrapping up, I wonder if you leave with any final thoughts about stress or maybe some tips on how to deal with it.
Yeah, well, so I'm working on this thing called a happy place society.
Mhm.
And what I want to do is create a forum, a community where people can come and deal with like-minded people who are all trying to have less stress and have cash, that feeling connected and feel accepted and feeling safe and having hope. The one thing I want to tell people, please don't sit in that cave and resign yourself to this is the way it's going to be forever. There are ways out of that cave. My book's one of the answers. There's other answers out there, right? But don't resign yourselves to my life has to be stressed out. Please seek it out. I'm getting ready to do a seminar in another month, and I'm hoping to do a bunch of seminars. So when those come out, I'll announce them on my website and people can sign up. Please don't resign yourself. There are answers to this problem.
Also, where they can find more about you.
So on my website, it's the Less Stress Doc. There's a website, and I have a Gmail account. It's lessstressdoc@gmail.com.
Dr. Sprouse, thank you much for being on the podcast today. I really do appreciate your time and had a great conversation. All links will be in the show notes for this episode. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wrapping up, I want to thank Dr. Gary Sprouse for being a guest on the podcast. You can find out more about him and his book over at lessstressdoc.com. All the links for those books mentioned and Dr. Sprouse's website over at nosittingonthesideline.com/145. Hey, I love this part. Any questions, any comments, or just want to say hello? I'd like to hear just say hello. I'd like to hear from you. Go to nosittingonthesideline.com/contact. You are really appreciated, and you made it this far. Thank you for listening. Till next time, take care. God bless. See ya.